Welcome to the Theorist Composer Collaboration, a podcast interview series highlighting modern composers and music theorists. My name is Aaron DiZarilla. I'm the host of this podcast and also a graduate music theory student at Florida State University. Today I'll be talking with Josh Henderson and Mikael Darmanie of the W4RP Trio about their collaboration with the artist LiKWUiD on their group's most recent album, Sermon of the Matriark. I talked with Josh and Mikael about their background, process of collaboration and recording, Sermon of the Matriark, creating art in the current political atmosphere, bridges outside of academia, and much more. So, without further ado, this is The Devil Went Down to Kakalaki via Georgia, from the album, Sermon of the Matriark, and welcome to the TCC.
Her tricks again, down there on that Palmetto Road. Bad chick, she magic. Sad sis, it's tragic. The clout chasers and fame goers, she uses them for practice. Hanging down at that crossroad, devil dancing twinkle toe, searching for a real weary soul. Charge a price or pay the toll. Walking by, she caught her eye. Johnny made, well, you can fly. The devil danced up to state of cause. You and me shit go bar for bar. Linguistic master, Johnny walked past her. You don't want none of this talent. Yeah, you fast, but I spit faster. You don't wanna take this challenge. Devil said, won't you try me then? You win, I'll make you famous. But if you lose, I'll take your soul and that will be your payment.
Johnny may grab that microphone and get ready to spit some bars. Cause hell's broke loose near Charleston and the devil's a superstar. And if you win, you get this shiny mic with fame untold. But should you lose, the devil gonna cop that soul.
The devil snatched up that microphone, that shot from the pits of hell. She spit slayed with poetry, her voice cracked and wailed. Double entendres, mantras spewed with every syllable tensions grew. The demons surrounded, she brought her crew. She dropped the mic, it's all on you. Johnny smiled and grabbed the mic. Her voice elevated and the words took flight. Her lexicon was beyond every single word, no jargon. The devil cried, she met defeat. The mic turned gold as Johnny preached. Better luck next time, I told you, miss. Bar for bar, I'm the baddest bitch. Story, kids. You never know what you got till it's gone. Appreciate what you have now. As the devil makes her way back to hell, Johnny continues to live on. He ain't saying nothing slick to a can of oil. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Told y'all 11 times. You only get one soul. Rich, take him to church.
Again, the music that you were just listening to is from the album Sermon of the Matriarch by the group Warp in collaboration with the artist LiKWUiD. That leads me to welcome Josh and Mikael themselves to the program. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. I know you guys are right now on your promotional tour for Sermon of the Matriarch. Congratulations on that release. All right, so we can, on this podcast before, I've never actually interviewed two people at the same time. You guys can go in whatever order, but how about you both introduce yourselves personally, professionally, academically, whatever you choose.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Josh. I play violin mainly and, viola and some electric bass. I live in New York City and been there about 16 years. And yeah. Having a good time.
I'm also, I started to say this to you before we hit record, but I'm also a violinist as well. Now, not nearly as good as you, I would say, but cool. And how about Mikael? How about yourself?
So I'm a pianist, and I play a few other instruments. I do like keyboard instruments. I play organ, harpsichord, and past few years I started being really into synthesizers, and live in New York. And I also love playing. I'm a classical pianist, but I started doing all these other genres with all those other instruments, and I'm like loving how much more room there is for creation when I escaped the limitations of the beautiful genre of classical music.
And that's one of the things that I'm very much looking forward to today, because looking at both your bios, anyone would be a fool to say you're not classically trained, both of you, in many ways. And the way that you apply it to your music is certainly something special. And I love talking about those limitations and breaking them. So I'm sure we'll come to that. But so both of you, Josh and Mikael, you are two parts of the Warp group. And can you tell us a bit about that? What is Warp? And yeah.
Sure. So yeah, our government name, Warp Trio, which is a little bit confusing. W4RP, then Trio. We were started by the cellist of the group, J.Y. Lee, an amazing cellist. Went to Juilliard, just like very, very excellent, accomplished classical cellist. Started this group with the idea of starting some kind of chamber group that, definitely did some traditional classical and stuff, but also, when we were starting it, maybe, warped the idiom a little bit, did, some things, at the time we didn't really quite know, which is something a little bit different. So we met Mikael shortly after then, and then Rick Martinez, our drummer, played the first show. So kind of born out of a piano trio tradition, but, expanded with like percussion. And then like on this record, there's spoken word. We work with a lot of singers. Officially Warp Trio, but this is a collective of sorts. Always a lot of people and things kind of going on stage.
Sure. And so how long has Warp Trio been around?
Probably about like 10 years now. Come on that.
10 years. And Sermon of the Matriarch just came out the beginning of January of this year. How many releases have you had up to now?
2 officially.
I think 4 officially. Like the EP, and then Circadian Vibes one, and we had a COVID record. I think this is the first album we actually had like a designated like album release party for. But yeah, I think it is. I think it's our best one so far.
Sure, and you're one of the things I'm most interested in my classes and talking with people, because just to let you guys know a little bit about myself, as a music theorist, what I study and what I like is popular music, and to get that can mean a million different things. So it's like more specifically hip hop, rap, and like top 40 pop. I really enjoy, and I also teach the songwriting course at Florida State as well. And I'm always interested by genre. What does genre mean? And like how we categorize music, and quite frankly from that people as well. Like, is that good? Is that bad? But also like, just talking about the effects that music have. And so that's a roundabout way of me asking, how would you guys describe your music in Warp Trio? It has a mix of so many different things. I mean, obvious classical playing, obviously, but you also have a lot of like popular music stuff going on. You got drum kits, but then you also have spoken poetry, spoken word, as in this album. So, you know, does genre matter so much, or how do you guys classify your music?
Well, you know, multi-genre is a thing people are saying today, and cross genre. But you know, to me, and you know, you're a violinist and theorist, and coming from classical music background, you know, one of my favorite composers to this day, no matter what I do, Mozart and Bach are, you know, some of my favorite writers of all time and musical minds, and they always had this kind of cosmopolitan fusion of things that they embedded in their works. And oh, that's a Turkish dance in a Mozart sonata, but it's not obvious. Or that Brahms connections with Hungarian music. And so there's always been kind of like inspiration from outside itself, because I think people got tired of the art forms of the minuet and the, you know, the kind of archaic forms. And it's cool to see how they've always been kind of revamped, you know, neoclassicism, etc. And so I feel like genre crossing has been something, cross-pollination has always existed in music. And I think labels are for, you know, marketing and for other things. It's not that important to us. That's my take, but maybe, I don't know, Josh might have a different stance on it.
Yeah, I think like just like what Mikael said, like the label thing, you know, we are in this business of like music, and we do need to like sell the music. Whether you're, you know, Hilary Hahn playing Tchaikovsky Concerto, or you're like, you know, Lil Wayne trying to sell a record, you need to have some kind of means that's like easy and just, you know, efficient of like disseminating your product. So I think labels, and especially with like the way that, you know, the world is with like Spotify and stuff like that, and the all powerful algorithm, you know, if things are easily codified and classifiable into these very kind of tight, strict lines, then that's good for, you know, our whatever music business overlords who are kind of in charge of like where this music is going and how can we kind of disseminate it properly. And you know, that's cool, but yeah, like Mikael says, I think it can be useful, these kind of lines, if you just want to, like, I really want to hear like you know, up tempo like house music or something like that, so you can go to something and get that automatically, like very 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 quickly in 2025. But you know, I think, you know, and that's nice. But with, you know, with our group and like a lot of other groups, you know, and I hope, you know, as we get so saturated and inundated with that level of categorization, that people start to get, you know, bored of it, just like Mikael says, like they did in, you know, the 1700s, and like, oh, I'm going to throw a little Turkish march into here, and this Mozart thing, or this Romanian rondo, or whatever, that we can, you know, hopefully move kind of past that, and you know, audiences and people are more into just like taking in, you know, experiences, and just like, all right, I'm just going to hear some music, I'm not going to think so much about it. So yeah, so we, you know, we kind of put out this record in particular. Didn't necessarily start off being like hip hop new music, but you know, there's like an organic connection with like Faye, who goes by LiKWUiD, our collaborator, who I've played in her band for many years. And we were like, oh, can you do like a track? And then it turned into a few tracks, and then just like naturally evolved into this thing that doesn't really have, you know, it's like you said, there's like hip hop influences, heavy, there's heavy just kind of modern, whatever, quote unquote contemporary classical influences, and it's just like it all kind of serves the purpose of like the storytelling and then the whole. And sometimes like you can do things with spoken word that you just can't do with the violin, and vice versa. So if we have all these things at our disposal, why not just use them all to tell the story and give this message, regardless of like whatever the genre lines may or may not be. And we'll see what happens.
We also like chamber punk.
Chamber punk. I can't say I've actually heard that one. That's good. No, yeah. I love the conversation that you guys are having with that. And before we get on to Sermon of the Matriarch, what we're talking about today, I want to pause again to talk about some more labels. One thing that I'm also very interested in is how people, not just their music, but identify themselves. This show is called Theorist Composer Collaboration. I've had on a fair amount of people that do not consider themselves composers, and certainly some other people who I may not always enjoy speaking to may not consider them composers because they don't meet some threshold. I've had people who call themselves producers, artists, just performer, even though they write their own music, they call themselves a performer, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with all the different taglines you can call yourself. Do those sort of labels matter so much to you guys? What do you consider yourselves? Composers, artists, performers, so on?
I think I call myself a lowercase c composer. But I think I primarily a violinist performer. But yeah, to me, it doesn't really matter so much. Like all my schooling has been in violin, even though I do like a lot of other things. And I think those designations, I've been thinking about this recently because there's so, like you brought up like producer, and I feel like that word in particular can mean like so many different things. Like what is a producer? Like I'm a producer. I've never touched an instrument in my life, or but I'm a producer. I have money. I'm financing things. It's like it can be a world of things. But yeah, I think I probably identify more as just like a guy playing music than anything else.
Yeah, I would say a similar answer. Just a performer that improvise, and then sometimes those improvisations lead to things that I write down, and sometimes other people play them.
Sometimes people give us money to whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Josh is a real composer. He's being very humble. He's a often sought out composer and arranger. Really, really great at that.
Fair. I've come of a mind after, I'm only 23, but growing up and going through graduate school and meeting so many artists, I'm of the mind that it doesn't matter so much either, but it's always interesting to see how people perceive themselves. All right, so let's talk about other than you two, of course, and Warp and LiKWUiD. Let's talk about the subject of today, which is your brand new album, Sermon of the Matriarch. So I guess I'm going to leave this real open-ended, however you guys want to tackle it. If anyone, the links are fully in any platform that you're listening to this right now. Links to download, stream, purchase the album are available in the episode description on any of those platforms. It's close to pretty explicit what the meaning of the album is, but just for fresh listeners, can you give us a bit of a rundown of the story and the message of Sermon of the Matriarch?
Totally. Well, in just kind of a nutshell, it's just like a celebration of Afro-diasporic, matriarchal, kind of folklore, but also just like life and just like that, like period. And as you said, it's a collaboration between ourselves and LiKWUiD. It kind of was born from, we were just all reading different things. Myself, I was reading some stuff about like witchcraft, I think in like mainly like the States. And then I was really struck by, I was into that for the woo-woo aspect, but then when I got out of there, I was like, oh, this is so much more about like power dynamics and just like how people in certain situations, whether it's like different classes or genders, whenever there's an unequal balance of power, how the person that is not with a lesser amount gets villainized and demonized, and at least these things are kind of thrust upon them in the context of what I was reading of women and like witches, and you see that with black and white and rich and poor and all these different power dynamic things. And when I kind of brought some of that stuff to Faye, LiKWUiD. And then she's just such a brilliant writer and just wrote like a novel of things. And we were like, oh, we have a couple ideas for some tracks. And this is, again, very loose, kind of coming together. And then, which is a beautiful thing about collaboration, where things can be very, very disparate and like spread out. And then they kind of congeal into some kind of thing. In our case, like an album. And, she, obviously, she's a woman, and we can't, we can write music and stuff like that and about feelings and whatever, but she has experienced this, so she can really direct, verbally, and just eloquently and beautifully, all these things. And then we can, use the text and use our, our quote unquote production skills, musical, instrumental abilities, and craft this kind of world, around that.
Yeah, I would say everything that Josh said has been the vibe of the creation of it. And in addition to like witchcraft and folklore and American folklore, we were digging deep into, like, Faye and I both have kind of loose, I grew up in the Caribbean, and Faye has this connection from South Carolina where she's from to Gullah Geechee, which is this really amazing kind of interesting bloodline of people in history in the Carolinas and in the South. So just really digging into the mysticism as well as the folklore of these cultures, but also how that intersects with writers like Assata Shakur, James Baldwin, just to name a few, Maya Angelou, etc. Just what is the overall message? And we had all these themes, so it's almost this fantasy on, letting these thoughts marinate. So there are kind of some figures that emerge throughout it, but it's not like, this is our characters. Mm-hmm. And then it's not in this narrative in a certain way, but it's this kind of, all these elements are kind of together in the same nebulous or something.
Sure. In the context that you're releasing this album early January 2025, it's hard not to think about political and cultural context in which the music is existing. And in some ways, the album is, there, even though there is, well, more than just mention, but grappling and dealing with turmoil, there's also celebration in it too. It's not just despair. But I'm wondering what headspace you all, or maybe even just, you can just speak about yourselves, what you're in when, in a time where, I guess you could say politically, or maybe that doesn't matter so much to you, but just culturally in America, we have a time where issues of, just to throw, it's so much deeper than DEI and so on, but there's so much cultural disrespect and displacement in conversation. And you can take this answer however you want, or whatever direction, but what was it like working on this project and releasing it at a time like right now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think, all, not just music, but all art needs to be reflective of humanity. So that's why, like, AI music art is probably not going to be a thing, even if they can technically do what, we do, draw a painting or whatever. But yeah, I think it's so interesting how, maybe like a few months ago, October, September, it was like, oh, well, we could go this way, and that'd be like a really amazing, crazy new direction for the country. Like, we could have this person, running shit or whatever, and that'd be wild. Or we could go this way, and we went one way. But just like the dichotomy of that, and how kind of close it is, and that's just like, we have these two, blue pill or red pill, and that's like so wild that it's like we could, even in the in like the lead up to this, we're like, oh, this could be like such a cool album to come out, and if, like, we take this blue pill, or I guess that doesn't work out, but not on purpose. But if we take, I didn't think of that. The album can be very, like, coming out, it can be seem very, celebratory and joyful, good, which it is. There are so many elements of like joy in there. Or you take the Morpheus's red pill, and then it can be like almost like a subversion of like, oh, we have to not despair, but that's like where we are. So it's like a conversation that's never going to be like done. Like it's probably not in our lifetimes unless the aliens come or whatever, and we all get on the same page or whatever. But it's a conversation that we have to have like as humans, and it's like the reality. Like there is a spirit. There's like aspects of like the album, and of course the stories that are not happy and they don't come from a great place. But with music and like art, we can take those things and like be like, all right, here's where we are. We can look towards brighter days. There's work that needs to be done by like everybody, and whatever small. Not that we were out here, on the front lines, marching on Washington and like fighting in the Civil War and stuff like that. But whatever little part we can do as like musicians to just add to that conversation and be like, here's we haven't like forgotten this, and we're still kind of working towards something better, positive.
I think about this often of especially in the classical music world. I mean, so much in the pop world where things are reactionary and immediate and fleeting and ephemeral. Like, does a work of art, especially a large classical work or something that's written in response to a global event or some specific event, like, is it able to exist detached from the event, from the meaning, from the thing it is reacting to? And that's why I think in our goal, everything Josh said was like, just to add to this conversation and not have any kind of specificity in a certain way, but just be specific about the things that are always there and the things that has always been a struggle in this country.
Certainly, those problems, although it may feel better or worse, don't necessarily change with whoever's on top. Yeah. And that's a problem of on top, but so on. And that this is an anecdote from a friend, so that I didn't hear this firsthand, but a friend of mine, Russell Avellanosa, who is a composer at University of Florida, he Filipino American, and he wanted to do a piece of work talking about hypocrisy of white liberals, which in a university setting is very funny, and I enjoy that. And he called the piece "White Noise," which I also thought was great. It was a great piece. I saw it performed, and at the time when he was working on it, a composer, Anthony Green, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a really cool guy. He came and did a masterclass at University of Florida, and he met with the composition students. And I remember Russell was telling me about his meeting with him, and I remember something that has stayed with me because, well, it's not a surprise. I'm white, and I don't, it's harder for me to on a fundamentally understand some things because I can't in a lot of ways. That's a whole other conversation. But this is something that Anthony Green said to Russell that has stayed with me. Russell was telling Anthony about all the things he was feeling, what he wanted to put into the piece, and the anger and some of the frustration. And Anthony was like, that's great. I really love your concept. But he said, always find joy with it. Always find peace in your own identity, not just anger and so on. Which, I don't know, I remember at the time I was like, oh wow, when approaching a work like that, maybe it seems obvious speaking about it right now, but at the time I was like, oh, that's very enlightening. And I really appreciate that about your guys' work with what you were just saying, Mikael, about acknowledging but not being frozen in time. So going a little bit off of the heavier subject, how long has this album been in the works? I know Josh, you were talking about like the evolving collaboration of it, but how long has this been in the making?
We recorded like maybe like a year and a half ago. We did a few days, got most of the stuff, and then my grandfather passed away, so I had to go out to Bay Area for a funeral. So then we were like, oh, we'll resume in a couple months. So about like it's like January now, so about like a year ago, we kind of wrapped everything up. Um, and but yeah, before then, like there's some like old pieces that we kind of like never recorded, and we kind of reworked and revamped them to be like, oh, this could be, for a designated. But before that, I don't know, maybe like
6 months or something. So maybe 2 years, and just 8 days of 6 to 8 days of recording, and just a few email collabs and phone calls, but not that much time together and stuff. Like people live in different parts of the country in the band. Like our drummer Rick Martinez is on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon, and our cellist Ji Young Lee lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and we're in New York. So when we get together, it's potent and concentrated, but a lot of times it's an idea and we go off and kind of do our thing and work on it, let things marinate.
Sure. And, I'm really curious about that recording process. We've touched on it a little bit, but one thing I want to highlight is, the Warp Trio is made up of all men or male identifying, I believe. And the album, Sermon of the Matriarch, and many of the themes have to do with LiKWUiD, your collaborator, the spoken word, the things that they are saying specific to Black female experience. And I'm wondering, especially now knowing that it was such a concentrated time of collaboration, like a pretty intense period, what was that like for you guys, recording, working through and bouncing off of each other, especially with something that I don't know how much you both have in your own experience with maybe women in your own lives or with LiKWUiD, or what was that experience like with those topics?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's hard to like, if we were going to be like, for example, like people have hit us up in the past and be like, oh, hey, would you guys want to like do this grant, like strangers for like whatever, blah, blah, blah organization to write a piece. And it's like, okay, cool. I'll sign a piece of paper and like, we'll see what happens. And like, nothing happens because there's nothing there. It's like two stranger parties who are trying to, it's cool if we can make stuff happen. But there's no history or there's no, chemistry. There's like nothing there. But something like this, like I think we have to, if we look from the outside in, it's like, oh wow, that is like kind of a crazy thing. But like, I think because we've like known Faye for like so long, there's like such a long history of like collaboration. Like the first day I met Faye, aka LiKWUiD, was Rick and I, the drummer in this group, were playing in another band like 15 years ago. Some like burlesque show or something crazy, and then she was just her friend was dancing, and she like came up to me and was like, "Oh, you're just so cool. Let's be friends. Let's like play together or whatever." And like I was immediately like, "Oh, this lady reminds me of my youngest sister." Like, it is an immediate friendship and like connection that's like there, and through many years of like projects like this and like other things, and like there's just like a familiarity, like a kinship, a family aspect. So it's not like, and I also grew up with like all sisters, so it's we can talk about these like subjects and like really do something like a project like this, and it's like genuine and it's like from the heart. And of course, all the guys in the group have known each other for so long. Like myself and Gino have played together since we were children. It's over half our lives. So it's not like it's like with your family, they're not. There's a lot of things you're less of. You can just be natural and just let things happen without trying to force them, or things don't feel weird. It can just like, hey, we want to do this thing, and it's like cool because there is that history and that chemistry and that time that things have developed and like cooked. So when you produce something, it doesn't feel like unnatural or like weird or like forced. It can just happen. And like in the studio, we worked with this wonderful record label, Phenotypic Recordings, which is pretty new, but they're a label that donates a lot of their proceeds to charitable funds. And the producer, Steve Pressman, this is particularly interesting to me. He's like, older, middle-aged, like white male, very, very accomplished classical pianist and just a brilliant guy. But he was doing a lot of the production stuff, and like, it was like being in school. And like, all right, take 9,000, Josh us out of tune. And it was so cool to me to see, again, him producing, again, with Faye, like rapping, and, again, we're on the same team. He's trying to elevate the music and the art so that the message is super clear, and just to see him respectfully, coaching all of us, being like, "Oh, Faye, on the delivery on this like rap lyric, like, we should watch out for that." I was like, "This is so cool," but it wasn't like any kind of like weirdness or like, which is props to him for being able to be like, "All right, it's my job here to make sure this is like awesome. How am I going to do that respectfully and like to not step on any toes?" And I was like, that's really amazing to see. I feel like stuff like that doesn't get celebrated enough. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page. We all know each other for a long time, so it was just able to happen, and we all want it to be good. So when we're testing out whatever lyrics or just like combinations of things, it can just work. Which is nice.
And I just add to that at the initial phases of the collaboration, like figuring out what this, because we had an offer for an album. So then we were like, okay, what are the puzzle pieces that fit together? All four of us were immediately like, okay, Faye came to mind, LiKWUiD came to mind immediately. And in the initial phone call, it was like, we were thinking of a track featuring Faye to kind of celebrate our, 9-year, 10-year relationship of them performing with us. Like, it's been a long, beautiful relationship. And just Faye and I are friends, and it turned into an hour-long conversation of history and family and all these themes of mythology and folklore, a very deep conversation. And then, and also she had another conversation with Josh, and it was like, one track can't contain. I was like, this is cool. It kind of just grew from there in this way of like, oh, there are phases, and there's this kind of LiKWUiD as an orator or a leader or a narrator through this thing. So it just kind of took its own shape. It wasn't like we women and whatever buzzwords. It was more like it was cliche to say, but it was very organic how things emerged.
Yeah, I didn't doubt it whatsoever, but it's good to hear that it was organic. I never doubted that. It's just I'm smiling because I'm thinking about, there was I would never put on blast someone so hard, but there was this one composer in my undergrad who he ended up writing a piece that was about gun violence, but that's not how it started. He started with the title, and then he found the subject, which I thought was just so. Anyways, it was a fit.
A lot of jokes, but I'm gonna refrain from. I come out as not funny, but
yeah, I don't know.
I was just gonna say I always like to give somebody the benefit of the doubt and say that the creative process, like if it spoke to them.
Yeah, all right. No, that is true. I will say it was a fixed media piece that used real sounds. I'm just going to say that. And that was I'm going to stop talking about that because I don't want, but yeah, no, I try to give benefit of the doubt too.
Speaking of frozen in time in a way.
Yeah, man. How about, since we're kind of like promoting the album here, we're promoting what you guys are doing. What are you guys? So I know that you guys are on tour right now. What is the whole album release, album rollout, performing? What's going on with you guys? What are you doing with all
Yeah, I mean, we had a really big release show in New York a couple weeks ago. Super nice. Had a wonderful opener and really packed room. This tour is because we booked stuff so far in advance, we're playing some stuff from that, but Faye's not with us on this particular run. But we're like it's an interesting tour. We're all out in like the cowboy states right now. We're in the Quality Inn in Grand Junction, And so it's been cool to like, I'm of the mind where I don't want to beat people over the head with like the message and like stuff like that. So like, obviously we can talk to crowds in Brooklyn, which is where the release show was, in a different manner, and we should talk to the crowds and maybe a more conservative like Wyoming town or whatever where we're going / coming from. But we can still like, slip in, what we're trying to do here. Like one of the pieces in the last track is a setting of this Asada Shakur poem to my mama. So, we're not going in just being like, all right, yeah, Black Panthers, let's go. This is like about this. But you can get what she's trying to get across. Like, hey, this is about really complicated relationships, like with family. And like, this is the freedom fighter Asada Shakur. Check out her poetry, dig more into this. We project the poem. We've been doing it. So the audience can just see, the audience that might not necessarily like seek that out, or that could be like totally against it if it's, coming at them from a certain, certain tone. But, I think that's the cool thing about what we can do as musicians. It's like go in these spaces and, like we're heading to Casper, Wyoming, and then we're in like Spearfish, South Dakota, and like all these like little places like this. And we can like, talk about these things, and like also bring people in to the conversation, have them be like, oh, let me think about that, and like here are these people that maybe they're not a lot of people who look like this around here, and are saying these things, but also like not like finger wagging or whatever, but here's a conversation. Join in this conversation, and how can we make this conversation better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's on this kind of leg of the tour, and all tours. There's always something like that we can give to, like when you see our election maps and stuff like that. Like because there's so little conversation between these sides of like people. So how can we do that? Whether it's rolling out an album or just playing music for people.
So it's been cool to play, like it says, it was booked before even album things and these kind of tours. So we play the show and then we have LPs, CDs of the new album, and people are just curious and they come and buy. But it's not like this is we're not beating down in people's heads or anything. So it's kind of cool to see this kind of curiosity emerge from the little bit of nuggets that are fed.
Yeah, I'm sure this may not apply to you guys so much because you clearly are so experienced, but I feel like for some that might be a nerve-wracking experience, but it seems like it's kind of cool and collected with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah. In 23.
Yeah. Sure. It's like you said, having a longer perspective of history than being too bound up in the moment. Well, before we move on to more general topics about music, your industry, and so on, is there anything else you guys want to share about your new album?
Yeah, check it out. Give some clicks.
Yeah. all I'll say is there's a kind of bonus, and I think it'll be added on, I think, the label and everything. But the middle suite in the piece is synced to a film from 1903, like one of the early silent films. So that's a little extra bonus feature that kind of little Dark Side of the Moon, Wizard of Oz, but more specific.
That's a cool Easter egg. That's neat. All right. So in the last part of this podcast, I like to get real general, maybe a bit philosophical. We already kind of have been. That's what I like to do, even in my own research and such. But what I always leave this super wide open to any guest. I want to ask both of you, Mikael and Josh, what does music mean to you? And you can take that any way you want.
Yeah, I feel like to me, it's a form of communication, and that's universal. Even if you can't hear, there's still music that can convey not not even necessarily information, but just like maybe like vibes is probably like a less scientific term, but a good. I think we all get the connotation of that. So like the internal music of the workings of our body, and the music of like the universe, planets moving around. I read a really cool Cixin Liu short story about that, like making music with like the sun and like stars, and this very beautiful imagery of like an intergalactic entity. I don't know if you read comic books, but like Galactus from Planet Eater type of thing. But they were like a musician, and they traveled light years to like make these symphonic things with the cosmos. And Cixin Liu is amazing, and I'm butchering the beauty of the story, but it was this. I love the idea of it, just like this communication thing that can transverse galaxies, and it's just like a almost magical form of communication that we can't always concretely define, but it's a connective tissue between all of us in some way.
That's deep, but also spoilers, man. I love Cixin Liu.
I didn't know this. It's a short story. It's like 10 pages. But
highly recommend reading the Three Body Problem trilogy. I don't know about the series, but the YouTube, the Netflix series. But yeah, my answer would be, similar things. You said philosophy and theory. The Josh was kind of tying in the Boethius, like the Greek kind of the classical. Analysis of music in a way, and I think I'm so with synthesizers and everything. I'm so obsessed with studying electromagnetism now and waves and everything, and how the hell can a note be played on a violin that creates this vibration of air molecules that reaches the inner ear, and the vibrations of the bones kind of tapping against these intricate circuits. So I mean, I think we're just fortunate, no matter what one believes, spiritually, philosophically, or religiously. It's just like we're just fortunate. No matter what. I mean, there's many degrees of that luckiness, but I think all the great things, it's the in a cliche way, it's the unspoken. It really is the unspoken. It's just like my journey into music when I was almost a teenager, when I was like 12, 13. I was in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, which I like how the back of that flag in the back, it's like the colors of the Trinidad flag, but rearranged in a different way. Yeah. And I was, starting to do all the crazy things that wild young people did, unleashed. And then my grandma was like, you need music in your life, some culture or something. So they wanted me to take piano lessons, and I was like, this is corny. What am I doing this? I kind of skipped for a year. I was not into it. And then I used to visit my family in America once or twice a year. And then I happened to come back, and there was, for a visit, we had an encyclopedia on CD-ROM at that point. And I was like going through all the things, and I heard a Chopin Nocturne, Opus 9, number 2, the famous E-flat Nocturne. And it was just a 30-second clip because CD-ROM was so limited then in the 2000s. And it was like, I heard nostalgia, I heard hope, I heard bittersweetness, and I didn't understand how a piece of music just evoked that, not knowing anything of theory or harmony or what made a melody, but it just hit me that music is such, it can speak to whoever, and it depends on where you are in your, so it's almost like prayer or meditation or something, or anger, or it really is the totality of us.
Yeah I really love that, and I find your story about the Chopin Nocturne. To transition, my next question is going to be, what does music theory mean to you? And I'm gonna take my small soapbox, and I want to say, from what you said with the Chopin Nocturne, that's really what music theory means to me. One thing that I do at the start of my songwriting course, which is for non-majors, the songwriting course is really an accelerated theory course that like forces you to write music. That's basically what it is. But the first day of class, we go over the syllabus, and then I give a short lecture, and I always tell them, I'm going to play for you my favorite piece of music ever. And I tell them, this is not my favorite piece of pop music, not my favorite piece of 50s, 60s music, not my favorite. This is my favorite piece of music, period. Everything. And it's true. It's Stand By Me by Ben E. King. That is my favorite piece of music because to me, it has such an emotional connection that is absolutely unbeatable for me and for my life. And there's different things in it that signify that to me. And it's like you're saying with the Chopin piece. In my opinion, music theory, for me, is a guide to explore that like unobtainable connection that you feel. What you were experiencing with the Chopin piece, like there's chords, there's reasons, there's suspensions, there's, all sorts of fancy words. But ultimately, that's all in service of what effect it has on you. Stand By Me, the reason why I use that in class is, technically speaking, it's so simple. It's such a simple song for the most part. But that doesn't discount what happens when it comes together and what experience people have from it. And so that's what music theory means to me. That might be really general. But, I study chords. I study, improvising chord progressions on the piano. I have to do voice leading, blah, 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 all these things. But really, that's all in service of that unspoken that you said, to me at least. And so that leads me to ask, what does music theory mean to both of you?
Yeah, I agree with that. In totality of what you just said, and I love music theory. I was always really into it. I had really great music theory instructors, and I look at it like you have to, like you're not gonna know, James Baldwin, Shakespeare, like these people who like write these, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever, these wonderful works of like text art, Eminem. It's not just like, just like random, it just happens, but there, we can look at like the grammar, which I look at as like a parallel to music theory. Like the study of language, and theory is like the study of, how we kind of quantify these musical feelings and emotions, and, to help us out so that we can do it, more, and like maybe even more so better, or have an idea of like how things kind of work, or just like physics, just like studying like the universe. But we can't just be like, the universe is a very big, awesome thing, but we have to have some kind of language to discuss it, to talk about it. So it necessitates some kind of code, like language, grammar, physics, music theory, in order to just like you just said, to do that, to supply, to bolster, to add to the emotion, to the human and spiritual and like universal nature of the phenomenon, the quote unquote the good stuff, like the actual music, the actual writing, the play, the actual supernova that happens. And you have to understand. You have to understand it on some level, I should say. You don't have to necessarily be like, okay, I know this scale really works over sharp 11 chords. But on some level, you need to know, like, okay, when I do this thing, it kind of creates this kind of result. And that's like a little squishy way you can describe something. Or you can, why not just have the exact way? Okay, I play this Lydian scale over this like thing, and like it's going to do something. So it's like a method of efficiency too, which, it's just like the language. We have language which is developed to discuss things like this. So that's
I really like Josh's answer about tying music to to language. And yeah, I always am, I have this feeling that music is this very rich, deep language. It's almost something like cuneiform type A or something, because it's like we can see all the symbols and everything, but there's just one missing Rosetta Stone of translation to actually give meaning. So I think it's like, people like I've read Schnarrenberg and these kind of theorists at Yale who liken, okay, here's Derridian deconstruction, and let's use that as an analysis tool. So, what the fuck am I talking about? Like post-structuralism, like using the way that linguists analyze language in the same way of theory of, okay, what gives meaning in structuralism, what gives meaning in post-structuralism. And so that same way, I think music is like meaning is almost there, but that gap is the beauty of the untranslatable. I think that's where you can hear the same Chopin and be like, oh, this is a happy, beautiful piece, or whatever. Or I hear something and say, this is happy, and you're like, this is the most tragic thing, like Mozart. So many people say they hate Mozart, and I think Mozart is or they're bored by Mozart, I should say that. A lot of musicians, they're like, classical musicians, it's like, yeah, but Beethoven is more interesting and fun. I think Mozart has this understanding of that language of music and how to use it in its totality, as well as Bach. And so the way I ground it in theory is that I see what is our baseline, and that every possible note is some degree of tension. So I think of Western music as this play of tension and release in this harmonic sense. So then certain notes are far away from it, like Josh is saying, what works with the Lydian scale. Some things don't work, but then knowing how to angle back home, and everything has this kind of elastic pull to tension. And I think Mozart was the best at knowing where this tension releases. And I think the best composers of the Western tradition are ones that use that and play with subversion. I think subversion is one of the most interesting tools in classical music. So theory is this really cool tool to me. As a pianist, it just came naturally because we have to think vertically. It's almost like we innately do it as pianists, and we have to, like, our dilemma is we need to liberate ourselves and be horizontal, or as opposed to a lot of single instrument, I just did a violin thing. Single instrument people are more like linear and horizontal. So it's a little harder. And there's like this, everyone has an innate feeling of like, where does this resolve? But then I like theory because theory highlights what's unnatural about music, and the things that are the most unnatural are usually what makes them so special.
I love that answer. And so, I think you two are in a very interesting position in a lot of ways. Both of you have quite the institutional experience, but also you have quite the commercial music experience. A lot of people that I interview on this podcast, this might not be surprising, are about my age. And at this age, for the most part, there are some extra special people I've talked to, but, I am from an institution and I'm part of it. I teach a class at it, Florida State University, music theory degree. And for the most part, the people I interview are either, now this can be a loaded word, but commercial. So they're not part of the building, the name and so on. And then I interview people who are getting their doctorate degree, or I've interviewed adjunct and fully tenured professors on this program who are the institution, not just part of it. But both of you have had feet in both parts, and it seems like good experience with it. Well, not quality good. I don't know, but you've had a fair amount of experience in it. And so I'm wondering, how do you guys see yourselves, Warp Trio, LiKWUiD, what you do and your art? How do you see that in relation to institutions, to academia?
I think that's a great question. And I mean, I feel like academia is in a interesting place, like today at that time of interview. And I'm constantly of like two minds myself about it. I teach adjunct at like NYU, it's like private students and Germans again in Longy School over in Boston. And I like teaching, and like I've been the recipient of just so much just generous and wonderful teaching, and as much as I can help out the next crop of kids, make sound on a wooden box and pay their rent. Like I'm happy to do that, and it's really exciting to me, and I learned so much stuff from my students. But the whole institution thing, because it's just like shit's like expensive, and there's like it's not like it was generations before us, where it's like, okay, you go to like there's a couple schools you go to really, and then you get an orchestra job, and it just made more sense, and things didn't cost as much. And so and I think institutions themselves are also questioning, should we be doing this? I mean, like the good ones, the honest ones, like is this helpful? So I think like our place, as a group, we do play performances and stuff at schools, and that's great. I think a cool thing about institutions is that they can be they get a bad rap for being a bubble, but it's nice to have a bubble sometimes, especially for a limited amount of time, where it's like I'm going to be in this little thing for 4 years, or maybe a couple years from doing grad school. And I'm going to experience a lot of different types of things that I might not necessarily experience. I think that's especially like people like, our parents, when they were coming into school, had like that experience, this like magical thing. You can maybe come from a smaller community, and you might not necessarily have a group like us, or like International Contemporary Ensemble, or like Jay-Z come to your school and do a college show, or Jack White or somebody. But like, I think groups need to, parlay with institutions, and for the sake of providing just like new viewpoints to folks that are in the institution and, attending, and it's like a part of that. And also like the opposite, like people need to, I think it's hard to be, like in one world for like so long. Like if you're just like a tenured professor, and that's like what you do like all day every day, and you're just in the bubble, I think that's not healthy either. So there needs to be a healthy amount of communication with the institution, and also just like the community around it, and how those things can help each other, and also bringing in things from other parts of the world and other communities to help and have that exchange of communication.
Sure. There you go.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. I would just add that the academia is in an interesting state. This particular musical academia is in a state of identity crisis, I think. There's a saturation of amazing players that are coming out, and there's also a saturation of non-amazing players, because universities need to survive and self-sustenance. And I don't think our group in particular is necessary, but I think, like Josh said, new opinions, and like, okay, who's out there doing what? Like, especially that we are from these generations of like, when it started drying up, the ever available symphony job, or the string quartet is this medium that there were hundreds of string quartets touring all over the world. Now there's a handful of those that are household names, and like Ataka is an amazing quartet with like something like Sony behind them, but a lot of those opportunities don't exist for other classical kind of traditional groups. So it's like everybody's like scrambling. What do we do? How do we stay relevant? And it's sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's really inspiring, sometimes it's goofy, but everybody's trying, and it's kind of interesting to see where that. So I say we're not necessary, but I do like the fact that there are other groups that are starting to do this, and things are starting to change. Like I think San Francisco Conservatory is kind of interesting. Let's see how it goes, but like the way that, okay, now we're a university with a conservatory with a record label, with a recording studio, with a management company. So all we can do is wait and see what that gives. But we love some of our favorite things are going to these colleges and universities and conservatories and shaking things up a bit in air quotes, but we don't think we're shaking things up, but just for their zeitgeist and for their, it's like, oh, it's different. And it's like, it's cool that we're a little older and have been doing it for a bit, and we love sharing the message and the crazy weird shit that we're have been doing.
And honestly, it is, to many, it might be crazy weird shit, but given the possibility of what's out there, it's certainly not even close. And, it's like, a couple things to say about, like opening up more is, I think for students, it's an okay bubble to be in, but I think it becomes really problematic when it's the professors that get real firm in their office, metaphorically and sometimes literally. I'm not going to name the theorist who said this because they are one of the most famous in the history of the field, and they're still living and working, and it would be career suicide if I name drop them. But they no. But it's something that they once said that really has stuck horribly with me. I think it represents a lot of issue with this sort of thing. Is they said, if composers are stocks, who are you buying and who are you selling? I see your faces. That is to say that as an academic, as a professor, as a theorist, you hitch your tag to the composer and then you get the success off of that. And I don't remember the musicologist that said this, but one of the things that's also stuck with me in a decolonizing class that I took was citation is political, and so is analysis, platforming. I congratulate the universities and the places that you're playing at. And you don't just exposure to music that is a little bit different than the canon. I think the Society for Music Theory, the big national organization, has made actually great steps in recent years. I think they're doing really great. But also, contemporary composer sessions are still about LiKWUiD and John Adams and William Grant Still, which is not contemporary at all.
Great composers.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
Oh, no. The amazing composers, all the ones that I just named, but it's very funny because to a lot of people in the room, that's brand spanking new, but no, not in the slightest, not like in style and literally time and so on. I think the field's made a lot of great steps, but Mikael, I believe you said, identity crisis. That is right on the money. If there's one thing, as you might be able to tell from me, if there's one thing music theorists like to talk about, it's what the fuck are we doing? But
I just have a quick funny thing about the what you just said about new music being taught is LiKWUiD and I was doing a project on Henry Cowell. I was writing a piece based on his stuff, and he has this he has a problematic history and etc., like a lot of whatever, but there's this musical autobiography that he recorded, which is interesting. It's him talking, and then pieces of from his career emerge. And he's talking about his upbringing of being a violinist and studying violin and piano at the turn of the century, 20th century. And he said his teacher was like, none of this new music, no Brahms, none of this Brahms new music. And that was already 40 years after, some of the violins out or something, but only Mozart and Haydn. And I was like, that's so funny that Cowell, so that, to see how far that jump into modernism. So I just commenting on what you said. It's the age old.
It'll keep going. It'll keep going in that fashion. Hopefully one day you guys are getting papers presented on by young theorists too. That's the point of this podcast. This music is just as valid as any sonata from 100 years ago, in my opinion. But you all are not stocks. Just to make clear.
Sell.
All right. You know, this I've loved this conversation. This is the sort of stuff I love talking about so much. And we're kind of coming to a close here, but you know, just to wrap up, it's funny to ask what's next for you guys because you just hit such a big milestone and you're still kind of in the moment of it. But what's coming up for Warped? Josh, Mikael, you know, individually as a group, what's going on?
Yeah, we're on the road now, just back on the, you know, on the that grind, which is always super fun, and we love it. And already starting to think about the next project. You know, I think that's the thing with these albums. You know, it takes like a couple years to get going, but then you know you're kind of over. You're like, all right. Let's like think about the next like thing we're gonna do. So you know, thinking about that and just new ideas and trying to commission some folks and you know get all the funds together and write some grants and yeah, just keep on doing what we're doing.
Keeping on, as they say.
Certainly. And so what would be the best way for the audience to contact you guys, whether the Warp Trio or Josh and Mikael individually? Yeah,
I mean, just warptrio@gmail.com. It's spelled normally there, just WARPTRIO at Gmail.
Or we have the WWs and
yeah. And on Instagram, we respond to the messages, you know, if you send us a DM or whatever.
And Facebook, if that still exists. And we're not on Blue Sky yet, but you know, we're good. We're easy to find.
Sure.
And then our personal social media can be found easily through those things too.
Yeah.
And you know, this has been a great conversation, and I want to end out. I always do this just similar to the what does music mean to you? This is as open-ended as it can get. So, Josh, Mikael, if there's something else that you would want to say about music, composition, life, anything, what would it be?
Just keep on doing it. All those things. But you can live. I was trying to make a live, laugh, love joke, but I couldn't think of it. Compose, listen, live, listen. Kind of right.
Let me say something and he'll think on that for
live, listen, learn.
Awesome. And any more?
I'll virtually see myself out.
Yeah. But I just add, that's beautiful. I'll add to that is don't, like, people have this hesitance to put things out. Like, of course, like, be a good critic of yourself, but don't, like, no one's gonna hear your shit if you don't put it out. So like that, you know, for musicians, like, you have your recital. For musicians in college and conservatories, you have your big senior recital in April or whatever. Don't perform at April for the first time in front of an audience. Like, it's not as precious. It is the most precious, beautiful thing, but it grows when you're out there performing. It grows and just like composers, put your things out, especially in the academic world, like that network of people that you're with, form these relationships, like forge these collaborations, because the older you get, the less time and the less frequency you have to workshop things. So that's one of the things I always say is produce, but don't be afraid to put your things out, especially with social media. Like, you never know what could happen.
You never do know. Well, thank you, Josh, Mikael, coming on to the Theorist Composer Collaboration, sharing Warp Trios and LiKWUiD's Sermon of the Matriark. A wonderful album. This has been a great conversation. I'm so happy to have you both on. It's been great to meet you, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We waiting on a savior to walk on water. Waiting online, who gon' take our order? Thirsty for something better, so we tend to oversip. Waiting for the Lord, so we tend to oversip. Dive in, I'm a black mermaid. Mother Earth, all trees, no shade. Throwing down my hair. Rapunzel, Nyla, queen of the jungle, don't fumble. Say it with my chest, don't mumble. Woman king, stop telling girls to be humble. Mansplain, country to country, saying the same Staying off my job, FTP, DTP, till I D-I-E.
Hello, this is Aaron again, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Theorist Composer Collaboration. I also want to give another big thank you to Josh Henderson and Mikael Darmanie for coming onto the podcast, for sharing their group's album in collaboration with LiKWUiD, Sermon of the Matriark. The W4RP Trio's contact info is listed in the description, and I would appreciate it if you could show them some support. For further updates and notifications on the Theorist Composer Collaboration, make sure to follow our Instagram and Facebook pages. You can listen to future episodes through our host website, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe to the platform of your choosing. If you want to monetarily support the work of the TCC, you can click the link to our Buy Me a Coffee page. All donations are highly appreciated. All of the relevant links to follow, listen to, and support the show are in the description. TCC episodes are posted every other week on Mondays, and don't miss our blog posts, which go live a few days before a new episode is added. Make sure to follow our social media accounts and relevant streaming platforms, because you won't want to miss it. But until then, this is Aaron, and thank you for joining the TCC.